Oh boy, I had to jump on this one. I had to jump on this one. There's no way I'm going to let this go without discussing it in at least a little bit of detail because Pete Carroll's mad, guys. Pete Carroll is PO'd. He is ticked off, as Mike Salk puts it here in this Zeet. And what is he mad about? What is he ticked off about? Is he mad at himself for doing a bad job putting this team together, coaching this team, preparing this team? Doesn't really seem like it to me. He had a little bit of lip service for that kind of stuff, but it doesn't really sound like he's mad at himself for the way this season is going, for the 4 game losing streak, for the 14% to 19% playoff odds, depending on what website you use, for the worst defense that he's ever put together here in Seattle statistically. He's not mad about any of those things. He's mad at the players, and Salk touches on this briefly. This is from the interview he did on the radio earlier this morning. There will be changes. I get the sense it is personnel, not coaching. So basically, Pete Carroll is mad at the players. And this is something that has carried over from yesterday. Greg Bell has a little bit more here talking about how Pete Carroll doubled down on the problem being the Seahawks players not executing. And this is something that started yesterday when, in Pete Carroll's post-game press conference, he said the Seahawks did a poor job executing. And what he's trying to do here, it's plainly obvious, is trying to say that the problems going on this team, namely on this defense, are not his fault. They are the fault of the players. The 2 players he really calls out here are Jamal Adams, who gave up the long Deebo Samuel touchdown, and Julian Love, who gave up the long George Kittle touchdown. I believe that there was also a mention of Woolen at one point during this radio discussion. So basically, he's doing what they call throwing other people under the bus. That's the only way that I can read this. And I think it's pretty clear why, because it's that time of year. It's the time of year when the Seahawks are playing really bad football, and somebody's going to take the blame, and Pete Carroll can't let it just be himself. He's not going to let that happen. We saw the same stuff happen 2 years ago. He's going to make sure that somebody else takes the blame, and this time it's going to be some of these players. Now, do these players deserve some blame for the way things are going? Of course. Jamal Adams has played a miserable couple of games in a row here. Julian Love was a very, very inconsistent player on Sunday against the 49ers. He's been, in general, a problem in coverage for a decent chunk of the season. He had settled down for a little bit there, but that game was probably his worst game of the season in coverage. There are other players on this team that are not performing up to standard, particularly on defense. But there's just something so incredibly, ridiculously distasteful and scummy about what Pete's trying to do here because it's very obvious what's going on here. This is every man for himself. This is the ship is going down. We're not going to have a successful season, and people are going to want blood. So I'm going to make sure that as many people as possible go after someone else's blood. And there's something very distasteful about that, especially for a coach who preaches keeping things in house. A coach who has in the past been critical of other entities for airing out dirty laundry, like, for instance, Russell Wilson. When Russell Wilson came out and complained about his offensive line a few years ago, and the Seahawks came very, very close to trading him to the Bears for it, Carroll came out after that exchange and said Russell Wilson broke the rules. When he criticized his teammates, criticized other entities on the team, he said, yeah, he broke the rules, and we had a discussion about that, about how he can't do that. And then we see something like this. So I don't know how this isn't Pete Carroll breaking his own rule. And even if there isn't a rule that Pete Carroll has per se, there's something about this that is in very bad taste. But even more important than that, I hope everybody realizes who is responsible for these players being here. I hope everyone realizes who is responsible for getting these players coached well, getting these players prepared, getting these players ready to play on game day is Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll was the president of player operations on this team for over a decade. And even over the last 2 years, when he lost the president title, he's still been the vice president. So he is the main reason why the players that we have are here right now. Maybe some of the most recent players, the guys who are in their first or second year, these guys that we're actually somewhat excited about, maybe that had more to do with John, but a majority of the stuff on this defense is still Pete's fingerprints. And getting the team ready, that's Pete. He's the head coach, right? Coordinators. Pete has a big hand in hiring the coordinators. So everything that is on this team right now is on this team right now because either Pete wanted it or that John wanted it so badly that he was able to effectively overpower what Pete wanted. So the players not getting it done, Pete Carroll brought the players in. The players not being coached well, Pete Carroll coaches the players. The players not executing well, Pete Carroll gets the players ready to execute on game day. There is nothing on this team that Pete Carroll was not here for when the decision was made to bring them in. So either Pete Carroll made the decision to bring in the player, put them in that situation, or it was John Schneider. And the only reason why John Schneider might have power right now is because Pete did such a bad job building this roster for so many years that he had some power taken away from him. It's one or the other. So there is nothing on this team that Pete Carroll inherited from the previous regime. We are many, many years removed from anybody on this team being inherited from Jim Moore Jr. or Mike Holmgren. We are many, many years from there being any hint, any tiny hint of a previous coaching staff still remaining on this team. Everything has been turned over, in most cases, multiple times since Pete Carroll got here. So I know what he's trying to do here, and I find it to be kind of pathetic, and I find it to be kind of sad, but in its own way, I guess it is shrewd because there are going to be some people who buy into what he's trying to sell here, and it's probably going to buy him more time. Not that he necessarily needs to, not that he even needs to do any of this, which maybe makes it even worse because I don't believe that he's on any kind of a hot seat right now. I don't believe there's any way he's not the coach next year. He doesn't even necessarily need to do this, but he does it anyway because he just needs as many people as possible to believe that this isn't his fault. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. Pete Carroll might be a bad coach, but he would be an excellent contestant on Survivor. If you put him on Survivor, he would win every time because he always gets other people voted off the island. Not only does he get other people voted off the island, he brings other people in from off the island, and then a couple years later we'll get them voted off the island, even though he's the reason why they're there. So there's a never-ending supply of people to vote off the island before you get to Carroll, and he always wins. He always wins the, what do you win when you win Survivor now? I don't even know. It's not the immunity idol. That's the, whatever. So, Pete Carroll, you're going to do it again. So, good for you, I guess. But Pete Carroll, blaming his players yet again.